Hello, everyone, and Ramadan Kareem. Thank you for coming. My name is Lindsay Bostwick, and I'm the Director of Artistic Planning at the Art Center at NYU Abu Dhabi. This conversation is part of our Off the Stage series, which also includes community dinners, visits to the NYUAD classes, and career conversations. Even though we're not able to meet in person, we still want to bring the artists to our community and find opportunities to open up the creative process and lean into the themes of the work. If you're not on our mailing list, please visit our website and find out more about these virtual events and upcoming performances. Today, I am really excited and thrilled for this conversation to further explore the recent engagement of Theater for One. Here we are with these incredibly accomplished and talented guests. Playwright and NYU Tisch alum, Tracy Rose, an artist, producer, and activist, Adam Hyndman, in conversation with Fatiah Touray, our amazing new Senior Director of the Office of Inclusion and Equity here at NYUAD. I want to thank Fatiah and her office and the Office of the Vice Chancellor for partnering on this event and supporting our efforts. We encourage everyone tuning in to stay engaged, add your questions and thoughts into the chat. And as a reminder, this conversation is being recorded for social media and our archiving purposes. Now handing it over to Fatiah.
Right. Thank you. Good morning to those of you joining us from the East Coast, and good afternoon to everyone. My name is Fatiah Touray, and I'm the Senior Director for Inclusion and Equity here at NYU Abu Dhabi. And I'm especially delighted to be here with our two amazing speakers that we'll be in conversation with. In Theater for One, we had the opportunity to tune into personal performances that speak to the times that we're in. This particular set of short plays was commissioned over the last summer when the project was reconceived in a virtual space, as well as a response to many things that were going on in our world, from Black Lives Matter to We See You White America theater movements, to the 100th anniversary of the ratification of the 19th Amendment and anti-racism. I'm especially excited that we get to talk through this pivotal moment through a lens of diversity, equity, and inclusion, and also provide a space for you as audience members to pose questions and your reflections from the play. And so just to get started, I want to introduce Stacey Rose, who is a playwright. And I just want to read a little bit of her bio. Stacey Rose hails from Elizabeth, New Jersey and Charlotte, North Carolina, respectively. And she is a proud mother, daughter, and sibling. Stacey is a 2019-2020 McKnight Fellow, 2020 to 2022 Playwright Center core writer, in 2018 to 2019, Goodman Theater's playwright unit writer, and members of the Civilians R&D group. She was a 2018 Sundance Theater Lab Fellow and a 2017 to 2018 Playwright Center Many Voices Fellow, just to name a few. Her play, America v. 2.1, was awarded the inaugural Berman New Play Prize, is listed on the 2019 Kilroy's list, and received its world premiere production at Barrington Stage Company in June 2019. Her play Legacy Land, developed at the Playwright Center, will world premiere at the Kansas City Rep in February 2020. Stacey is a recipient of the 2019 Virginia Toolman Foundation Women's Commissioning Grant in partnership with Rattlesnake Playwrights Theater. Her work has been presented at UNC Charlotte, On Cue Productions, NYU Tisch School of the Arts, the Fire This Time Festival, the Brooklyn Generator, the Bushwick Star Reading Series, Mosaic Theater, Rattlesnake Playwrights Theater, National Black Theater, and Pillsbury's House Theater, just to name a few. She served as a writer's assistant and script coordinator for season 1 of the series She's Gotta Have It. And she, as was mentioned previously, she holds an MFA in dramatic writing from NYU Tisch School of the Arts and a BA in theater from UNC Charlotte. Stacey's work celebrates and explores Blackness, Black identity, Black history, body politics, and the dilemma of life as other. So welcome, Stacey. Next, I would like to introduce Adam Hyndman, who is an artist, producer, and activist. He has worked extensively in the arts, performing on stage and screen with roles on Broadway and in television. Some notable credits include NBC's The Sing-Off, Children of Eden at the Kennedy Center, Aladdin on Broadway, Once This Island, Once on This Island on Broadway, and currently with the company of Hadestown on Broadway. Adam is passionate about creating possibilities for people to connect and activate their purpose on a direct level through teaching, advocacy, anti-racism facilitation, personalized wellness and coaching, and through supporting arts projects. Adam is currently incubating several projects as an independent producer, as well as within the team, the Tony Award-winning team Octopus Theatricals. He was a co-producer for the Broadway production of The Inheritance. Adam serves on the board of directors for Broadway for Racial Justice, where he creates community through mentorship and volunteer programs. His purpose in his work is for disruption, radical accessibility, and reconciliation. He is also a founder of the Industry Standard Group. Adam is also a freelance instructor, as well as a guest teaching artist at Princeton University within the Lewis Center for the Arts. Adam graduated from Princeton University with a degree in cultural anthropology and minors in theater and dance. So welcome, Adam. Welcome, Stacey. I want to start off with thinking about where we are right now in this moment, as we are on the heels of the guilty verdict in the trial of Derek Chauvin and the murder of George Floyd. And then we recently heard the news of the murder of a 15-year-old Ma'Khia Bryant. And so I just want to start off by asking, how are you doing? How are you feeling in this moment?
I'm not sure there are words to sufficiently describe. I think words have yet to be invented to explain the exhaustion of being Black in America. There literally are no words. It was just the combination of the two just kind of took me out yesterday. If I'm going to be honest, it really, there just aren't words. I feel a lot of things. One of them is anger. One of them is sadness. And one which has been like increasingly the deepest feeling I've had is to not be here in this country, like just to not be here. And it's not that, racism and anti-Blackness doesn't exist in other places, but I'm sick of this specific brand of racism and the American version of racism and anti-Blackness has worn me to the bone, and I'm tired.
I appreciate our conversation with holding the space in this way, because the compounding impact that yesterday was to the litany of what the experience of white supremacy is in this country. It underscores the reality of a dual consciousness that exists all the time, right? So there's, there are no words. but there's there's also a lack of breath, I think, you know. So just I think that also kind of underscores there's an ability to even speak, you know. So often we can process through our words, but there's even the inability to breathe and even have the ability to speak our words right now. So
right. And this idea of just this constant movement forward, that despite not having those moments to breathe, to process, to get up, to continue to work, right? To act as if our existence in these Black bodies is something that is completely outside of us, and that, you know, we're even here today in this space in this way, right? Because we have to, and we have continually, as Black people, had to move forward in that way. I'm going to pivot a little bit, but not too much. Last year, as we stated in the introductions, the We See You White America theater movement really rippled throughout the industry. And in the 7-month accountability report, one of the pillars that stood out to me was this discussion around equitable presence. And it states, as the global majority, we demand a bare minimum of 50% of BIPOC representation in programming and personnel, both on and off stage. This applies universally to all hiring tiers of Broadway, on Broadway, off Broadway, regional theaters, funding recipients, artistic commissions, production departments, front of house staff, offices, professional training centers, etc. Right? And I would also say this even extends to representation in higher education in terms of who are teaching our students, right? And who this work has traditionally been open to. And the other thing that stood out is, like, we are not only our bodies. We insist on intentional meaning and exploratory long-term engagements, right? With us as cultural workers in our audience. So I wanted to start off by just giving you some space to talk about your own experiences regarding this presence, right? And as it states, you know, people of color, we are the majority of people in the world. And thinking about it in terms of representation and what some of those experiences have been.
I'm sorry, this is the first time I've really had to sit.
And Stacey, I want to give you the time, and I want to give you that moment. Don't necessarily feel compelled, and I'm also aware of the ways in which we as Black people, our grief is often on display, and the difficulty that you must be feeling in this moment. And so I want to give you the space for that. And we can have this conversation in a number of ways. We can pivot, we can shift to this moment on what it means, even globally, for Black people globally. So we can sit in this space. And for those of you in the audience, I do welcome you to put some of your comments and your thoughts and reflections as we reflect in this moment in the chat box.
Yeah, I think it spoke. I think what's happening is like what you spoke to earlier is this sense of like keeping going. And yesterday was a day that like I was just like I literally intentionally did not engage the news a lot outside of like watching the verdict. And then immediately just like I deactivated my Facebook page because I just didn't want to deal with like the noise of everything. And I'm like in this moment realizing it was just because I was avoiding feeling. Because I'm so I'm tired of feeling it, you know. Like I have a 22-year-old son. And I worry about him a lot. You know, because it just seems like it is a declaration of war without war being declared. It just increasingly gets more blatant. And so like when I have seen some of, in relation to theater, when I've seen some of the reaction to the "we see you what" demands, and I've seen white people say, how dare they demand, and where do they get to demand? And white supremacy is just like, it's just the most absurd thing. It is the most absurd thing. It's literally someone coming into your house and destroying it and daring you to be upset. And so it's like when people want to be in conversation about what these demands means, it's not that confusing.
No.
It's not that confusing about what it means. It means that we are tired of this industry making money off of our backs with very little inclusion of us in the money making, on the money making side, on the decision making side. In an industry that we very much prop up with our Black and brown and non-white bodies all the time. So when I get very like, I can remember sitting in a meeting about this and having there be mostly just watching as mostly white people be in conversation about whether or not these demands be adhered to. And it's just funny. It's just, you know, it's just funny. But yeah, and thank you for allowing me space, Fatiah. I just, you know, I feel like when you said it, I had to sit with it, and it was a lot.
Just the courage of Black artists astounds me every day. The resilience, the empathy, the innovation, and to continue uplifting what I view as a love offering. These are not demands. These are love
offerings. I love that.
To a negligent system that has systemically and structurally oppressed beloved community members. And these beloved community members took their own time and effort and energy within their hurting, because that's what we know about grief. Grief does not end with a verdict. Grief does not end with a burial or a memorial. It's those moments that you actually leave that which was holding your space and go back to the loss and go back to the gap. And in the gap, these artists came together and said, there is a potential in this field I think all the time about the idea of a calling, right? In our work as artists, so often we think about that as calling. I think about that Latin root vocatio, which is actually calling, vocation. It's a calling to this field, to this industry. And we have invested in it in ways where we see the potential. We see the generative ways of this ritual being used for healing, for affirmation, for challenge. And we extend our time, our effort, our resources, our bodies, our creative inspiration. And even in this way, we offer in love solutions, recommendations, ideations. Because on the opposite side, where are the offerings for a safer ecosystem? I wish we did. I wish we didn't have to talk about a world where there was a "We See You" white American theater, because perhaps in that future vision, the labor, the time, the energy, the resources wouldn't fall on non-white bodies and experiences to sift through the issues that we didn't create. So at the radical foundation of it, I'm moved because a collection of documents or thoughts or suggestions still have to be interrogated. They still have to be adapted. We still have to think about how it works in practice. But I'm moved that there is enough love and faith in the system to even offer these.
Right.
That's what I'm moved by constantly, the resilience.
And the labor it took. I always think about the labor it took to put that together.
The labor. And one of the things that came to me, Stacey, as you were talking, and Adam, is I was about last year around the height of George Floyd. It was a conversation with Dr. Michael Eric Dyson, and he talked about the ways in which Black people in the world have had to study, breathe, learn, embody whiteness, not because it was something that we necessarily wanted to do, but as a means of survival, right? And when I think about us in this global context and think about colonial histories and the ways in which people of color had to study, learn, breathe, uplift, uphold whiteness as a means of survival. And we think about the fact that you talk about labor and the fact that people of color, the bodies and the labor of people of color, and in Adam, and thinking about the love, right? And what you're bringing into this work, but still constantly thinking about, even the discomfort, right? That came up. I think oftentimes when we talk about this work in terms of diversity, equity, and inclusion, it's whose comfort are we prioritizing, right? And in theater, whose comfort have we been prioritizing? And what would it look like to have these conversations and to center this work in pro-Blackness? And why does this cause so much discomfort for people?
There's a million things to respond to that. And you set the tone so much because it really is emphasizing, this idea of a colonized state that has infiltrated all of our collective experience, which prioritizes assimilation, which puts us on a gradient that in the fiber of our social consciousness, we understand anti-Blackness rooted in all realms of our society and also our professionalism, that we can so casually and with like cavalier sense uphold white supremacy and its manifestations of anti-Blackness in just codes of conduct, in what professionalism is, what professional looks like. And I think it's leading us to a constant state of that awareness of who is this for? Where are we accessing it from? Who are we prioritizing? What experience? And I look at pro-Blackness, inherently experiential. I think about that on that dichotomy of where we've come in the conversation, and I say conversation specifically, of ED&I work, equity, diversity, inclusion, because that's inherently, that type of work is inherently for the vocabulary building of white people. It's in the service of white learning, ED&I work. What we need to be moving into is the active process of anti-racism, the active practice of decolonization, because that's in line with pro-Blackness, which is inherently an experience and a practice. So getting out of the esoteric, so where we're having this conversation and actually not putting this value system in practice, in action, which is the hard, vulnerable space to be in, then the space of there's no arrival of anti-racism. But it's a practice I put on every day, and I work in emergent ways that are small and local and consistent. Because I look at the literature that has been formed in terms for over decades around diversity and inclusion work. And we're still in this place. But then I look at a pro-Black experience and how that permeates in all ways of being. And it shows us and gives us manifestations of how to relate to each other. I think about Beyonce's Coachella concert. That is an experience of pro-Blackness that permeates through the environment. That's not theory. That's not critical analysis. It's relational experience. It's prioritizing the value of people and how we can be together in a liberated way. That's the work we need to be going towards.
Absolutely.
And I think on the level of the personal, it's just a constant shedding and reimagining and shedding of like you were saying, Adam, like, why am I doing this way? And what feels more comfortable for me, or what feels more like, I think we are taught from a very early age to ignore that thing that my grandmother used to call mother wits. And mother wits was just the instinct we were born with. You know what I mean? I would hear her and other kind of elders in my community talk about how someone didn't have mother wits. And I think it's just that thing, that inherent, I pay attention more to that, to when things feel uncomfortable. I pay attention more to opportunities I'm presented as a Black artist, and why am I there, and why are you asking me to be here, and what's your intention, and what work are you willing to do in order to work with me, not what I'm willing to adapt to work with you. And how am I, what am I communicating to the people I love, to like, what am I communicating to Black folks with what this work is saying? And it's just been, as I go on, you know, in my career, I'm just kind of hyper vigilant of things I'm being asked to do, or me being asked to have, and that kind of, I've been in several that kind of feel like they're, oh, so you just need a Black person on this, cool. So like, what work are you willing to do in order to work? Like, what work are you willing to do on you? And so often, the other person who is not really ready to do the kind of work it takes to work with me, a Black artist. And so I just kind of on in kind of keeping present to the things that I've been just woefully unaware of, really tuning my radar to the marginalized within my marginalized community, queer Black folk, trans Black folk, and really like lifting up like their needs, or you know what I mean, or supporting them in any way that I can. There's a lot of undoing to happen on the level of me, on the level of the individual, on the level of like, even with parenting, like, I had this like hardcore idea that my son had to go to college. And if he didn't go to college, then I had somehow failed. And I had to like look at that, right? And that was like kind of a 2-year process where he and I would get into these really heated back and forth arguments about school. And then it dawned on me how miserable he was in high school. Like it was because they were not attuned to his needs. They were trying to get him to fit a standard. And I'm like, this young, he's talented. It's just, he learns in a different way, and they really are not trying to adapt to that. So I think too, on the level of the personal and examining like myself and how I move through the world, how I parent, because even though he's an adult, I still parent. But it's just like paying attention to not guiding him through the lens of respectability politics, which inherently seeks to kind of cleave closer to whiteness and what is right and what is decent. Letting him explore music over these last few years and watching the joy he finds in it, and watching how good he's become, just letting him go and letting him leaning to himself in ways that we aren't often encouraged to, because we are told, oh, well, if your kid hasn't done XYZ, then your kid hasn't. It's just undoing on a level of person, self, family, has been really a lot of my focus in the last few years as well.
Thank you for that. And I wanted to pivot a little bit from what you talked about in terms of kind of fitting into these boxes. And I know Adam talked a little bit about the ways in which people of color have been innovative, right? And when we think about at least diversity, equity, and inclusion, I know a lot of times people approach this work from a deficit model, whereas my viewpoint is it breeds excellence and innovation. And one of the things in terms of this theater for one, right, is thinking about the ways in which it really has taken theater out of that box, right, out of the ways in which we normally experience this. And I want you to talk through a little bit about the innovation that was in working in this space, and having not only your play be a part of this, but then I know, Adam, as you also being involved in the work, what was it like to kind of, you know, work out of the box in terms of the ways in which this project was conceptualized?
I'll just set the tone a little bit to toss Stacey, because I think it comes back, right, to decision-making levels and having inclusion at the forefront, even in our conversations around how we adapt during times. If there wasn't a diversity of perspective at that decision-making level, at the tables that scaffold the models that we choose, the collaborators we choose to bring into the fold, we can't adapt. You know what I mean? So exactly that idea that is honestly data-driven. We for a long time, especially in the corporate world, we know that diversity and inclusion actually does what you say. It breeds creativity, it breeds innovation, it adds to collective excellence, especially in ecosystems, because, and that's an investment, that's a value add. So when we're saying we need to invest in these ways, it's actually bringing returns. It's not just for some ideological reason. It's bringing returns. So when we get to a place where we're struck with unprecedented times and we're forced to adapt in unprecedented ways, we have the ability to be nimble because we've decentered in the way that Ayobel says. We've decentered traditional ways of thinking and prioritized an inclusive thought that I alone might not have the single solution, but together we have an adaptable solution. So like from a producing standpoint, those are the conversations just permeating in the time of crisis, right? Because even without the practice and the ways that we are going about anything, when, you're shuttered in your work, you still have your core values that can lead you in discrete ways. And that's kind of what happened in the producing model. How do we adapt with this community in mind? So I'm curious actually to hear, Stacey, what your thoughts initially when the piece was approached to you.
Yeah, so it was very like I had done like some like Zoom reading stuff, and inherently in my work, I just kind of I come from a background of self-producing in Charlotte before I even left to come to New York. So I'm very much game, and like I was already kind of primed for it because I'm just always looking for like, okay, so how do we do this now then? And really like that it excites me. So when I know a lot of folks were struggling in the beginning with, I'll never do a reading on Zoom and that's not there and blah, blah, blah. I'm like, So I immediately was like, yes, this is very interesting to me. And I thought about stories that would literally fit in this container that Theater for One was presenting. And I immediately thought about, because I have two nephews, one who is still within the prison industrial complex here in this country. And I think about, and many other loved ones actually. And I think about, for some reason, I immediately began to think about window visits and how there is this longing to touch and to like how can you best communicate your thoughts through like 4-inch thick plexiglass, and how do you get it out there, and what does it mean for someone to kind of have to disconnect from family? It's particularly, I was thinking about the time we were in, which was, we were like in the thick of COVID. And I knew from just the job I was working, so in my other life, I was a respiratory therapist, and I understood that many prisoners were going through a lot of because they weren't getting visits, right? And visits literally statistically shift outcomes with inmates. And because of COVID and because of severe outbreaks within prisons, you weren't allowed those visits. So I kind of settled in on that. And then I thought about some women in my family who had done some time and been separated from their children. And it created it just shifted the relationships permanently. And that's where I landed on the piece I had, is this person through that plexiglass, right? Through the plexiglass that was created by this beautiful platform that Theater for One created, was trying to have an effect on a child that she probably wouldn't see again, or leave a mark with a person who was with the child. And I mean, it was such a, it's so funny because once I landed on what the idea was, I wrote it incredibly quickly, just from understanding what the negotiation is with people who are imprisoned, and the ways in which they exercise the little power they have is usually with words, be it through those visits or be it through letters. It's really the way that they kind of aim. It's the tool they have. And so I wanted to make sure that she was using her tool in the most effective way possible to land the most impact possible, that may just stay with this person enough to make them remember her, and then by virtue make that child remember her and want to reach out. And it was just the saddest thing as those words came to me. It was it was very sad. And I thought about like what this character would have become had the circumstances of her life not led her there. You know, I often find that people who are imprisoned are so skilled. They become so skilled at negotiating and figuring things out, and how that innovation, as you spoke of, Adam, really could have translated to shape their lives if only given a chance. And I'm probably on a tangent, but it was just really, that opportunity was just a chance to sit with my loved ones who are imprisoned and really kind of channel their wants and desires and their hopes and the dreams for the generation after them. Yeah. And it just created this perfect opportunity. Honestly, I don't know if this play can live outside of this very specific experience. And I'm really okay with that. I think theater, like you're saying, it has to become more malleable. And I think COVID and this time of like racial uprising in this country really has forced us to become more malleable. And I think as we take an eye to moving back into theatrical spaces, that we don't forget the lessons we learned outside of those spaces, and we don't abandon the innovations we made. Like how amazing would something like Theater for One be when disabled folks can like who can't necessarily navigate to the theater can be like, I was able to, my mom and my sister were sitting at this very desk, and they so often didn't get to see anything that I've done because it's been far away from home. So it's just like there are so many great opportunities made within these innovations, often involving Black and people of color. I just don't want it to stop. Yeah, I just don't want it to stop as we shift back into a world where things are opening up.
And in this virtual pivot for Theater One, every creative we brought on was a Black, Indigenous, or woman of color, and that was deliberate and strategic in order to galvanize and be able to create work to meet the moment and actually be able to see into margins. And I think it just makes me think because, you know, Stacey, your piece was so impactful. And I had the privilege of seeing so many of these pieces transform and realize in a very short period they galvanized very quickly and were able to hit such nuances, such colors, and such depth that I've been moved to continue to think about how are we creating art and how often are we missing the moment because we're stuck in our bullshit too often, and we're stuck in these patterns of collaboration that actually take us away from responsiveness, right? And I think about how that's what the ritual's for us to be able to be adaptive in these moments, use our art making to challenge us and get us out of our experience so that we can have tools to respond to our moment and be better in the moment. But how often do these processes get distilled in these ways that actually take us out of the efficacy of the moment? And this is a rambling, I'm sorry, but like...
No, it's not. Please.
It's all connected in this conversation around disruption, around inclusion, around anti-racism, that it's also about how can we be responsive to these moments so that we can get the greatest efficacy out of our art making, out of our collaboration, so that our collaboration is actually not preventing us from creating these new connections, creating this synergy of synapses firing so that we can actually be more prepared for our next given moment.
Yeah. Thank you for that. And at this moment, I know we just have a few minutes left, and I know that we have people in the audience that want to share some of their reflections that they had with this experience and some of their questions. And so at this moment, since we are an intimate enough group, I just welcome you to either raise your hand or just unmute yourself and speak directly to our guests. Any questions, thoughts, or reflections? I'll give you a moment to continue to think about that, but we can continue on. And I just wanted to, and I think you started talking about this in terms of the ways in which this moment and thinking about COVID-19. In terms of COVID-19. Is that someone trying to speak or? All right, I'll just continue. In terms of the ways in which you had to pivot from the moment, in terms of the moment that we're in with COVID-19. But I guess as you think about your work and thinking about what's next, and thinking about the intentionality as Stacey discussed, one of the things that I did want to touch on really quickly is like, what has it meant to debut this work here in this context in the Middle East? And even thinking about the moment, right? And thinking about the ways in which we've traveled, or how we've, what borders have been kind of left off, and how this digital age has really kind of shifted that for us. And I guess, what has it been like to go beyond the United States, I guess, in terms of your work, and really bring it to this stage?
It was thrilling. I was like, this, I call this the little play that could. Like, it's been done in Chicago now. And I'm like, it took a pandemic for me to become a New York Times critic pick with a little teeny play. I was like, oh, I was doing it wrong.
I would have been doing it right this whole time. And
yeah.
everyone else had to catch up.
Exactly.
And that's so much about, right? I think we stumbled into this conversation of access.
Yeah.
We don't take this new lens of access into our practice and our art making moving forward, we miss a full blessing of this.
What do we do this? What are we doing this for?
Well, if we miss this, the possibilities of access and intercontinental and international connection of the very possibilities of how different people with access needs can enter into space. If we're missing these lessons, I don't know.
Ain't no hope for us, I'm telling you.
Right?
I'm telling you. Like, I think about how even the Playwright Center in this time, like everything, the way they pivoted and then just started doing all of like their readings and all that. People from all over the world have been tuning into, like, the connection is bananas. The ability, the only, like, it's the ability of theater to have the reach of mediums like film and television. If we are smart, if we continue, if we have processes that like folks globally can tune into, if we are filming our shit, like that was like the thing that nobody wants to. Of course, you should film things. People want to see this stuff. It's just like I can't go back. Like I can't go back. I can't go back to the way it was. Like if I can't innovate and find new ways to put up theater, especially on a platform like this, it's just an honor. Like, I won't get into the whole story, but it's literally, NYU is the school I literally got outright rejected from when I applied to grad school. And through like going back to the ancestors, when they say what's yours is yours, that thing boomeranged back to me. Like, and they were inviting me to New York after I'd been flat out rejected. So it's just like, and now like, it's just mind blowing that like I'm here and sharing my work with NYU students in Abu Dhabi. Like, that is like, I'm a little Black girl from a projects in New Jersey. I still have to process my life sometimes and be like, who is this person? But it's like, I am who that experience grew me to be. I'm not that because, like, in spite of that experience, I'm who I am because of that experience, and because of the people I grew up around, and because of the masterful storytellers I watch drink beer and talk shit on corners. Like, I'm here because of my Black story, which isn't everyone's Black story, but it literally is my Black story. And so it's just an honor to be engaging people all over the world in this way.
And the ways in which even the themes, right? You say it's your Black story, but the global reach of these themes and of the experience and how they reach people across the world, regardless of background and socioeconomic status, or you name it. And I think that has been particularly powerful, and particularly hearing the responses from people in our community, especially in terms of the work. And so as we're right in the last couple minutes, any not departing, that makes it sound so, I don't want to say that word. But any last thoughts, any things that you want to leave with us today as we reflect on the work, as we reflect on this moment, as we reflect on this day, and of our experiences that have led us here?
I guess I will just forward that it really takes all of us. It really takes continued action and effort and intentionality in these ways. And it requires us to be in that process of taking what we're learning, taking what we're experiencing, and putting it on trying it on so that we can get closer and closer to a relationship together. And our art making is just a vehicle to do that type of human work. Yeah.
Thank you. And Stacey, before you close, I love the fact that you have on the Star Wars shirt, because I know that EDI, as it's stated, is the framework and who we've been centering in that work. And what I love about the work I do here at NYU Abu Dhabi is being able to shift that. And so I like to use a Jedi framework, which reminds people of Star Wars, but it's centering justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion in the work. And so thinking about that, and as we close, someone just said they were born. Oh, you were born on May the 4th. Okay, look at that full circle moment. May the 4th. Oh. May the 4th be with you. Yes.
The upcoming birthday.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's coming up soon. Stacey.
Lord, honey, I was obsessed with May the 4th with you. I was lost, baby. I'm lost.
Yeah, no, just any last thoughts that you want to leave us with. Any closing remarks?
Sure. Yeah, I just thank you for holding space. I think this was kind of what I needed this morning, and didn't realize that I needed it. I just kind of, and the thing is I had been feeling low and heavy, and I'm usually up at 7, which is, it's surprising that I overslept, because I'm usually just up, and I just feel like my body was tired.
Mm-hmm.
I was just very, very weary. And this, I hadn't talked about it, and even on like my text strings and things like that, I've just kind of been like, I can't do it. And yeah, this kind of created this amazing space to do this with both of you, who are incredible. And I hope to continue to get to know you over time and things like that. And we can just sit back and braid each other's hair.
Mm-hmm. And I can cornrow hair. I'm good at that. You can see my daughter. I do all the designs and everything.
I have grown out my little faux, and I'm ready for the braids. I'm ready. But no, seriously, this has just been, it's really been like what I needed to kind of process yesterday. So I thank you for holding this space. And I thank everyone who showed up and listened and watched my work, watched the work of the other incredible playwrights in the process. And I just thank Theater for One and everyone involved for making this possible.
Yep. And thank you all for joining us. Thank you for those words. I also didn't realize how angry I was, even afterwards. Just that anger, and what I've been carrying all day, because I had to keep going. And so for me in this moment,
thank you for not like you know how many times you come to panels and you're feeling one way, and just holding space for how we were feeling in this moment is important in the work that we need to continue to do. Quite honestly, is like stop like pretending to be okay when you are not. And being able to be vulnerable and cry or emote and all of that. Like I just uphold Black folks' ability to be emotional in ways that we're often discouraged to be, and of being don't be too loud. I encourage Black folks to be as loud as possible on today, as joyful as possible, as you have a capacity for on today. I love loud Black children in my neighborhood. Please be louder. Turn up the volume and just be who you are. I encourage that for us today.
Yes. Thank you.
Making room for abundance, I'll say. Making room for vulnerability means we're making room for abundance.
And as Adam, as you discuss the importance of also Black joy and joy for us, and not in just being from a trauma-based perspective. So thank you all. Please feel free to reach out. Thank you, Bill. Thank you, Lindsay. Thank you, Lana. And if I missed anyone, I can just blame it on the fact that I'm still pretty new to the NYU Abu Dhabi community. But I thank you all for sharing this space, and see you all soon.
Absolutely.
Bye.
Bye.